All right, we're rolling? Yes? We're good? All right. Scott, Cully. I don't really have to say your names because it'll be in the notes, but
Howdy.
welcome to the regular crew. You guys made the cut. So
It's an honor and a privilege.
it's really
Or a little scary.
it's really an effort to create a shared sense of blame when it doesn't
Doesn't go
go well.
yeah.
Then it's I can't, the other way when it was always a different guest,
I get it.
the blame squarely
just
fell
you.
on me. So
Now you can spread that.
so now we can kind of spread it around. We're all kind of in the same. I think you're the
Age
youngster. You're a little bit younger, but we're kind of all in the same generational category where we grew up with. I mean, it seemed like we grew up in what I would call like the golden age of Hawkism. Like it was just a given that
We were going.
America was supposed to, be the one to set order in the world and protect the helpless people and like do all of the, good things. Like that was just what we're supposed to do. And I always thought that was kind of part of my mindset that was our role. But as I get older and I watch these things play out, I start to think like maybe, like, why do we do that? And maybe that's not such a good idea. And how did this all start? So I did a little bit of like historical, like looking back over some things. And here's what I came up with. So if you go back, so there's every president. So presidents are not solely responsible for foreign policy, but they kind of like lead the mindset in a lot of ways. And so we have all these doctrines, right? You got like the Truman Doctrine and the Kennedy Doctrine, and the And so I'm looking back and I'm realizing, prior to the Truman Doctrine in 1940, whatever, after World War II, the United States was pretty much a like not get in anybody else's, like our position from the Monroe Doctrine, which was in early 1800s, was that the Monroe Doctrine said that we want Europe to leave us alone and we'll leave them alone. And that was and that really didn't change much except, well, there was a Spanish-American War, but that's because they blew up our ship. But, and that didn't really change until we got through 2 world wars. And then Harry Truman came out with this idea. Hey, Trev, you got the, pull up the New York Times article. The New York, there you go. This was it. This was the New York Times edition. It said, Truman acts to save nations from red rule, asks $400 million to aid Greece. That's $3 trillion by our today. To aid Greece, because, Greece and Turkey were at risk of communist influence and Congress fight likely. But so what I discovered is that from this point on, this is when we started having this notion that it's our job to like be present in other parts of the world and take care of business. And initially it was communism. This was about communism containment. We got to stop the spread of communism. Then Kennedy came along with his doctrine, which was containment plus reversing it in certain parts of the world, in the Western Hemisphere. Then Nixon came along and said, well, we really have to help our allies. Like whenever our allies are in trouble, we got to help them. We're not necessarily going to try to defend the whole free world, but we're going to help our allies. Then Carter said, the Persian Gulf's really important, and we need to make sure that
Which I find really interesting.
We need to make sure that the Persian Gulf doesn't succumb to communism because of the Russian influence in Afghanistan and we had and then Reagan was the one that said, well, why don't we
roll back, right?
Roll back and backing, guerrilla warfare against the Soviets. And let's see, who else we got on the list? Clinton. Oh, and then communism wasn't around anymore. So it's like, well, we don't have to really fight against the commies, but we need to do some sort of ass kicking in the world. Otherwise, we're not America.
We have
right? So now it's like part of our ethos, even though it wasn't originally. So Clinton, it was all about the humanitarian interest, right? There's genocide over here, and there's just going, we need to go and do all this shit. And then Bush got gifted the terrorists that, and now it becomes all about stopping, not only preventing terrorists from coming here, but shutting them down in places, and that led to the concepts of like preemptive war and the other
43 really pushed. Right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I meant the second Bush, really, right? And regime changes. So then we got to Obama, and he was just kind of squishy on the whole thing. He would never really clearly say
he didn't really have
a doctrine when it comes to this. So my point is that now, as a 50-something-year-old looking back, and along the way in there, right, we had like the Vietnam War, we had the Korean War, after World War II, we had the Vietnam War, and we had presidents in all these other places, and I look at it and I go, I'm not, there's the question of, when you read about this and the disagreements, most of the time the disagreeing is about how it ought to be done, right? But there's not so much discussion anymore about whether it ought to be done. And so that's what it got me thinking, as like a regular guy living in America my whole life, like, should we be doing this? Should we be doing, like, is it working? Is it helping? Like, anyway, so what do you guys think?
So
you mentioned to me when we talked earlier that you find yourself drawing the line in different places in your life.
Well, so growing up through the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Really coming of age through the 70s and the 80s.
Right.
Through the Cold War, there's this very different feel from now being.
Yeah.
And some of it is being young and not really appreciating really what was happening globally. So it was just all effectively propaganda, what you see and hear. And then becoming an adult, having different issues, starting to worry about economies and budgets, and so, you start to ask different questions. But my thought here is particularly with Truman's doctrine, as I understood it, didn't actually mention communism directly. Right? His original quote was about defending the oppressed and those being effectively put upon.
Pull up the one from the National Archives, the one that says "I believe," and then scroll down, go down to where it says "I believe." You can just find it. This is what he actually said, because you're making a good point, Scott. Yeah, can you blow that up?
Yeah, I can't read.
I've learned not to say make it bigger.
Yes, support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. Doesn't actually say communism.
Right. He also says, I believe that we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way, which is different from traditional imperialism,
yes.
Right? And there's some question about whether that actually works.
Yeah.
And then, this is my favorite. I believe that our help should be primarily through economic and financial aid. And that was what the Marshall Plan was about, right? He was sprinkling money. But look how far we've come from the first guy that said, I just think we ought to give economic and financial aid to where we are. So
what I find interesting, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, go on.
What I find interesting about this is even back in the 70s and 80s, obviously in the Cold War, I equated this to communism. But my question is, coming out of World War II, if Russia had been a good ally, a good friend, would it have been about communism? I mean, I think our fear was their influence in Europe. Communism aside, I don't actually think it had anything to do about communism so much as we don't like the fact that they have so much influence or could have so much influence.
They being
going forward. They being Russia.
Russia, okay.
Soviet, what was then the Soviet Union.
So it wasn't so much about communism in the abstract. It was about specifically this one country that.
But then you rally around the Reds, right?
Yes.
This is what's. It's not. It's like, how do you get the American people to go, oh, that's terrible. So every time we see that, we have to go in and squash that.
Yeah.
And the easy thing is, well, it's communism. It's not.
Well, right. And in fact, was it Truman that called it the virus of communism?
One of them did.
One of those guys.
One of them called it a virus.
Came after him. So now you're describing this thing that's like a, it's not specific people. It's a disease that's spreading, right?
So I think there's a little bit of a difference between what President Truman wanted or felt like the United States should be doing as a global power, and how he rallied support to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a similar boat as you. I think certainly as where I was at in life, stages of life, your maturity, how you see things. It's interesting. Did he really see this as a benevolent, here's how we help? We're going to rally around this idea of communism because that's going to gives us something to unite against. Or was this simply a case of, no, they knew that there was more to this, quite a bit more to it, but we can make it look as though it's humanitarian, benevolent.
This is how we've been trained to think now.
Yes.
And we think about everything this way.
You put a lot, and as going back to your comment of where you're at as you in the stages of life, I think certainly today, everything, or at least for the majority of people, I believe, looks through the lens of we just don't trust the government any longer. And that era, they did. There was a lot of trust in the government. Like, well, if they say we're giving them money to help the people that need to help, we're doing the right thing. That's what America's about. We have money. We can help you. And that has been flipped and bastardized.
Right.
Crapped off.
For me, that changed in Kuwait.
Times.
That changed in Kuwait?
Yeah. I was just out of school working for McDonnell Douglas, working for a military contract company. For me, it was pretty clear, we're going to go help, but there's a very selfish reason why we're going into Kuwait.
Yeah.
We'll fight them back, but it's...
Which was what?
It's because they wanted to make sure they secured the oil.
The oil, yeah. Right, because the Permian hadn't really been discovered yet. not in the way that
that's absolutely correct.
Right, yeah.
Right? I mean, if you think about what was happening in the 70s and the oil crisis is through that time period, coming out of that time period.
So, but it's funny because this is how you make a good point, which is, there was a time when people, in spite of all the, like, there's always been jokes about politicians and lawyers and whatever, and there's always been, like, people have always had an axe to grind against politicians, and against the government. The old jokes about government work and all of this. But in spite of all that, there was this general notion that the intentions were right, or that what you were seeing was what you were getting, and that the reason why people said they were doing things was that was
the core of it is good. It's directionally.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of, because I certainly don't. At some point, I came to the conclusion that whatever it is that it looks like is happening is never what's actually happening. But I can't say when I really reached that. I mean, you're obviously there because you said was there more to it? What would they have? Because what would Truman? If this wasn't such an innocent, we need to protect free peoples, what would have been the underlying motive? Like, conceptually, what could he have been up to?
I think this is the U.S.'s coming out party.
Coming out party?
Yeah, I think so. I don't actually. Everyone says
I thought that was happening right now.
Yeah. Everyone says the World War II is when we
that was pretty good.
When we stop being isolationists. But I mean, I don't think that's actually true. I think the Monroe Doctrine is not about isolationism. I think the Monroe Doctrine is about us starting to grow up. It's only the 1800s.
Yeah.
We're not even, we're 100 years old. We're not even.
No, it was 1820 something, so
right?
we're like 50 years in.
I mean, it's considering the age of the country to tell Europe basically, stay out of our backyard. We'll take care of our own business. We don't need you, and we don't need your influence in South America or anywhere else.
Right.
Yeah. Now, coming out of World War II, where you could say, we might have showed up late for whatever reason, but coming out of that, there's no question that the U.S. has a role to play.
And we're the cock of the walk at that point. I mean,
this is Truman stepping out saying, we're the big man on campus, and we're willing to play that role.
And we're willing to influence, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you said it well there. It's our growing up. That's the moment we grew up, and like we have the money, we have the influence, we have the power. we're going to play a new way.
We're going to take.
Yeah. There's another interesting thing that happened, right? Which was prior to World War II, for many years, Britain played the role of like kind of the keeper of world order to some degree, right? But they did it through imperialism. Right? Which was to newly minted Americans was anathema, right? Like we're not gonna we're
not doing that.
We're a republic. We're not gonna do we're not gonna start colonies. But they did create Britain did play that role in a different way, and there was this notion of the Pax Britannica or like the Pax Romana. There was a certain amount of peace in the world because they were in control of a large amount of it. After World War II, Britain got so completely destroyed that it took everything that they could just to try to rebuild their country. So they couldn't keep. So there was a void. Who's going to be the what's that word that I can the hegemony the hegemony yeah who's going to be the one that's right the power in the world, and we can't let it be the Soviet Union, so
it's going to be us.
It has to be us.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what.
So how did that go for us?
Well, it's a very slippery slope. I think even the way you laid it out as one large influence after another. I mean, how you look at Pandora's box here, 400 million, and when was this?
47, I think.
400 million, 47 is a pretty good chunk of change.
A lot of money.
That's a lot of influence.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's more influence. I mean, this thing quickly plays out to basically the muddy water that we're in today, and the backstabbing and the hatred, I think, that can also come towards this country.
Yeah, yeah. So
maybe the law of unforeseen consequences came into play here.
Well, we there's some question about how much have we how much good have we done and how much bad have we prevented? So clearly some.
Yeah, I think there's certainly an argument. It'd be hard to quantify.
There's also a question of what happens in the void. So the U.S. doesn't step out.
Right.
Good or bad. I mean, and you can.
What would happen if we didn't?
What happens if we didn't? Which you can't answer, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't think you could. Just to your point, I don't know if you ever could. Look at how much the resistance was to get engaged in World War II. And then we do. And not saying it was not necessarily all the U.S., et cetera, or anything along those lines necessarily, but we're a heavyweight. I mean, there's a lot that this country brings.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can sit on the sidelines.
I agree.
No.
And stay this powerful and sit on the sidelines. I don't think one can be the other.
So we couldn't. So what if
you have to leave?
What if hypothetically we said, you know what? We have all the resources and the capabilities we need to be self-sufficient. Of course, there was a time when we thought we didn't have the oil that we needed, but we know we have that now, even though we don't want to use it anymore. Different show, different episodes. But just so leaving out some of the picky details. If we said, look, this is a big ass country, we got 3,000 miles and whatever it is, 1,500 miles or something like this, and somehow in all of that, we got everything we need. We'll figure out our own shit and we'll protect our borders. And it doesn't we hope it goes well for the rest of the world, but we're just going to take care of our people and make sure that we're all good. Is there a moral deficiency in taking that view?
Well, a moral deficiency? No. I mean, I think you can.
Well, because you're saying we can't just sit on that, because that would be sitting on the sidelines. But it would be look, we're not.
But America at this time.
Let the world figure it out.
And that's why I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out. I don't know that at this moment in time, and I wasn't there. I'm not quite that old. Call it your teenage years, calls it your 20s. America at this point thought we were invincible. I mean, it was like being a 20-year-old. It was like being in college.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
and they flushed with money, flushed with success. Economy was booming. It was our time to step out on the world stage and take control. And you could have backed away from that, but I'm not sure that if we had, does the United States as a technology leader, as an industrial leader, as a world leader, continue to do that? And then does the United States as an economic leader continue to grow? Like, where does that grow? If you don't have influence in Europe, if you don't have influence in China, if you don't have influence across the world,
I like that.
Do you really grow now you might argue we're too big and maybe maybe success, you shouldn't have it, but
right.
I don't think you can't have both. I don't think you can be a great country in this world today and not have international influence. I think that's a naive approach to.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that. I think certainly from the standpoint, from a moral, sitting back.
Trevor. There you go.
Better.
That's better.
Check mic.
He's turning from when you first set him up. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
From a moral. Yeah.
I think thinking through it from a moral lens, or thinking through it from a moral lens, maybe you could, but I think one plays into the other too much to where exactly what you're saying. Like, would the U.S. even be what it is? Let's say the rest of the world just continues to do its thing. Let's say there's a void there that doesn't get filled with another Nazi Germany. It's not just some new version of it. Let's say everything just continues to play out. Does the U.S. thrive and become what it is? I don't think you can. I think you get there by leading, and that's what we were doing.
Yeah.
And I think did we have good intentions? Probably, I think.
Yeah. I think
I don't know if you asked that, but I feel like that's where I was going with my brain.
Yeah. So I guess
You hinted on it.
Here's the thing that I struggle with is you look at things now and you go, well, I guess this isn't so much of an intellectual conclusion as it is. It's probably more of an emotional one, right? Where you go, like we have so many things that we're dealing with. We have so many, we're so internally dysfunctional. We got, the country is becoming more and more polarized. Nobody can agree on shit. And not only can people not agree, but they're angry with the people that don't. And so we're dealing with all of this and name all the issues internally, right, that we're dealing with. Oh, and now we got to worry about these guys in Ukraine because somebody wants to make them part of their country again. Oh, now we got to worry about, this. So once again, there's fighting in the Middle East, and we gotta.
And here we go.
And my attitude's not quite this shitty, but I'm saying this. You start to feel why is it? Why do we have to take our money and our resources? And by the way, it doesn't always go very well. I mean, Vietnam, we had peace. The Paris Accords had it settled. And then there was a regime change, not a regime change, but there was, the change of hands in the election in the U.S., and we reversed course, and then the evil communists took over all of Vietnam again. And, we have all these, you got the Iraq and Kuwait stories, and, well, there really weren't any weapons of mass destruction. And, and it all sort of looks like, you ever look at somebody and you go, what you're doing, you're not very good at it. So maybe you should try doing something else. That's, I guess as I get older, I'm like, you know what? Let's just
Me too. Me too. Like
Right?
this line moves
You
a
know what
little
I mean?
bit as I go. But
Yeah.
to your point, I think though that again back to Truman, like starting there is the kind of the foundation for this. The U.S. had its house in order then, so it was kind of easy to step out and do it. I don't know that we have our house in order right now, so it's really difficult to look at what's going on in Ukraine and say, should we be involved there? That's not. They're not a NATO ally. Should we be involved? What's going on with Russia? Do we care if they take Poland? Which, if he keeps rolling, right? Just keeps picking off non-NATO countries.
Poland, I'd hate to see Poland. But I like Poland.
They're not NATO though.
I think Poland ought to be,
Yeah,
But see, that's where's
where's this line, right?
Yeah.
What's going on in Israel? And oh, by the way, we just announced $2 trillion in debt, and
yeah. That's before the accounting trick.
before the account, yeah,
And it's really
before
3 trillion.
right.
Yeah.
So and the troubles we have here in the States. I mean, I don't think you can not say it's a legitimate argument to say we've got trouble here. We should be spending money here. I just saw someone, I don't even know who it was, say, one of the politicians say, we absolutely will find the funding to go support the Ukraine and Israel.
I'm sure they will. They always
Like,
do.
okay,
Yeah.
but having someone then turn around and say, what about our homeless problem? What about our immigration problem? What about our border issues?
I was
What
thinking about this
what
on the
about-
way over, though. How much of that is the idea of you want the battle in somebody else's yard, not our backyard? So we're willing to fund that and have the Ukrainians fight Russia and everything else that's happening, or what's happening in Israel, but keep the fighting out of the U.S. And I can imagine there's some truth to that. But I also believe heavily in the never let a good crisis go to waste. And
I don't know what
Best
you mean.
way to get reelected is
we
to
are-
have a war.
we are a country built on making money off of crises.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we know the Rothschilds are probably funding both sides of the war anyway, right? So, yeah, it's there is this question of, is it possible? So, at first you say, do we have a moral obligation to take care of other people? So let's pretend we don't, right? And that's the part that I waver on, like, over the years, right? And but still, if we want to remain a sovereign, independent nation, how much do we need to take care of business outside our borders so that it doesn't affect us? And affecting us isn't just like, like in Red Dawn, where they, like, the paratroopers
Came in
which,
and-
by the way, the thing in Israel was, like, eerily, like, reminiscent of that, right?
Hadn't put that together.
Right?
That's
Remember
right, yeah.
the original Red Dawn, right? Where they, like, they come parachuting in.
Every 1980s star.
Yeah, they come parachuting in. Yeah, but there's other types of sort of pain that can be inflicted, right? Economically, or through whatever different means. So, how much? What's the right amount of what we ought to do? And it's if you follow the Kissinger approach, like Real Politics says, rather than going by one given set of principles, you sort of do what seems to be the right thing at the right time for the right set of circumstances, which I can kind of go with that. Then what it would say is it requires, at any given point along the way, it requires very careful thought and very smart decisions and good judgment, all for the right reasons. So who are we going to trust to do that now, right? So back to your point about, if we don't trust, if we don't really trust our government, then with, like, the simple stuff, how are we gonna, like, if electing a Speaker of the House has kind of got you, like, tangled up in knots, how are we gonna trust you to figure out what's the right balance to handle the right.
Yeah, yeah, it's just like having your comment on having the house in order, and our house is most definitely not.
Yeah, the house.
Yeah, no,
Literally not in order.
Well, just for me, when I look at what's happening with the Ukraine and the amount of money that we've dumped into that, now don't get me wrong, I'm sure if you dug, you might be able to get a little more detail, but to me, it looks like we're just writing blank checks. I mean, I'm sure there's some structure to it, but for the most part, it looks like it's blank checks. And also, just going back to that moral compass thing earlier, I know we're fighting without fighting. It's kind of the thing we're doing to some degree. But 10 years ago, I went to a cybersecurity conference here in Houston, and they were showing website after website of the Ukrainian government recruiting hackers, and here's how much they would pay you, and here's how you could do it. This is what you would get if you got business or credit card, social security number, et cetera, et cetera. And it looked crooked from top to bottom, but now we're like, here you go. Here's $8 billion.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. I think it goes 100% back to the house is not in order. I mean, you just can't. There's too many hands in the pie at this point, and they all have selfish intentions.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to ask a hypothetical question. This is a what is that thing that all the cool kids say now, Trev? A thought experiment. This is a thought experiment.
I haven't heard that, so I must not have cool kids.
But by the way, I am curious to know about the younger viewpoint on this. So, do you want to chime in now, or can I ask my thought experiment?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. What if? So something else that happened in the course of this period of history that we're looking at, how things changed in the United States. Something else that happened during that time was we went from having the country's identity mainly as a collection of states, right? Like the original thought was it's the United States of America. We have a bunch of states that are largely united, but I'm going to do a Kamala Harris word salad here.
I'll do the laugh.
So the original idea was, well, it's mostly states, and then there's kind of this thinner federal government that holds everything together, but the states largely operate on their own. Mm-hmm. And we steadily drifted, and this is like how this happened and why this happened is a whole nother discussion. But the fact is that we went from that to having a very, very inordinately heavy federal government, and the ethos of the people is like if you walked up to pick a person off the street. Not this street, is a little dangerous here, but a different street. And you said, tell me what you think about the government. I guarantee you, they will assume that you mean the federal government if you don't specify.
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
They'll say the federal government.
It would be Biden or Trump.
Right.
It would be those two on what do you think about it?
So here's my thought experiment: is if we had stayed, if the United States of America had preserved our identity, not only like on paper, but like in our heads and in how everything played out, as more a collection of states with a very minimal federal government, how would that have impacted, or how would that change this notion that we're the big dog and we're gonna, because we wouldn't really be that, right? we'd be something different.
Yeah, maybe. My struggle with that in mind is what pieces of history don't take place to push us in this direction. Like I believe World War II. I believe Pearl Harbor, right? Pushes us.
I keep forgetting you're an architect.
Pushes us in these particular directions. So it's difficult for me to sort of back that out without backing out
everything.
Some of the history that pushed us in one direction or another. yeah, we would be smaller. Well, I mean, it goes back to your original one. If
I mean, we'd be the same size, but we'd be.
But our influence would be smaller, or our influence would be smaller.
Would we be more at risk?
No. We wouldn't be less at risk though either.
No. But if we'd stayed like that, we wouldn't necessarily be. If we had not. You okay over there? just not in the microphone. If we had not consolidated ourselves around this big national presence, right? Then would we be more at risk of having other world powers?
Yeah, how do you fund that?
Get at us.
How do you fund the defense necessary to support that and defend that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, if we were still that independent,
Well, I mean,
you
the
got to
idea
rally
was,
around something. You got to
yeah,
fund against communism.
yeah,
We got attacked, Pearl Harbor. Like, all of a sudden, we're the 9/11. Like, here's all my money. Like, just go get the bastards.
So yeah,
that's
yeah. Maybe I think if I take what was giving you trouble about the question and turn it around, maybe it's really that. In spite of this great idea to be this collection of states under a thin, maybe that the way the world evolved, that it pushed us to become something different from what the original plan was.
Yeah, I think
existentially,
I think we had to.
Yeah.
To Cully's point,
Yeah.
I think with and you saw it with the first piece, right, with Greece and Turkey, right? And I think at that time, Britain actually said, "We're out. Like, we can't deal with this."
Yeah, no, they had no buildings left in London.
And they actually said, "We're not." And so there's this void with Russia's influence coming in,
Right.
And that's what pushed Truman into saying, "All right, we have to take on this role. It is our time and our space, and we have the ability to do it."
Yeah.
And steps into that space. If that doesn't occur, if World War II doesn't occur, if there isn't that need for that global power to step in, someone probably steps into it, but it might not have been the U.S.
Yeah.
But then I don't know that we're as prosperous as we are today, frankly, even with all the trouble that. I'm not happy about our debt and a lot of other things that have gone on, but
Yeah.
I don't think that we're
We'll just print more money.
unfortunately. Yeah,
I mean, when you control the printing press,
I could do that.
it's fairly easy.
Apparently, the monetarists are having their day in the sun now. That's an interesting, because I am one of those people who laments that we didn't stay more state oriented,
I'm a
and
big states' right person.
and
That's why Texas. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's probably more prevalent in Texas. That states' rights type
I think so.
mentality and stance.
It certainly is prevalent. I don't know about anywhere else, but it's an interesting thought to think, well, as nice as it sounds, maybe it wasn't in the cards in terms of how the whole global socio-political thing was going to evolve. We needed to become this heavy national thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that the circumstances would allow us to do
Yeah.
anything else without.
Yeah. See, Scott, this is why I thought it'd be good to have you on, because
Yeah.
you always think of shit that I don't think of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't. Man, you just kind of
Still not true.
You just wrecked my whole
But-
worldview.
To your original question or the topic, Hawks versus, I don't view this necessarily as Hawkism, depending on your definition.
Yeah. So what? So talk about that. What do you?
I think what we did in Kuwait and Iraq, although you could argue about Iraq with 9/11, you can argue some other issues were in play. But to me, that's Hawkism. I'm going in. This is the way it's going to be. I'm going in with or without my allies. We're just stepping in and taking care
Yeah.
for our own reasons. For not necessarily to hell with you all, but we've made our decision. We're going in. We're changing this regime. We're
Revenge from my dad, basically. Was yeah.
Or I don't like the way this regime's going. We're going to change it. We're just communism, not communism. I mean, you look what happened in Chile.
We took out Saddam and we got ISIS instead.
Right. And look what happened in Chile. Right. We backed we ousted the communists, and then the guy that went in was a complete and total humanitarian nightmare.
Yeah.
So, and that's regime change, and that to me is Hawkism.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't necessarily consider this statement from Truman or our interaction on the world stage as Hawkism so much as you can call it policing the world, or you can defending the UN or NATO or
an interesting thing there. Which, by the way, I was only looking at I was looking at the Truman point as kind of like the turning point where we went from being principally one way to now being a different way, and then it evolved.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Harry Truman had seen what we were doing in some later stages, it's like some of the ones you mentioned, he would have been like, whoa. But
it's not what I intended.
Pandora's box, like he said. So I read a really interesting piece in National Review, written by I forget the guy's name. Anyway, he explained I thought it was a really good observation, which is that if you want to be the one that establishes order and preserves liberty, basically, right? And there's a difference between liberty and democracy. If you want to preserve liberty in the world, then one way to do it that has proven to work is, and people are going to take exception to this when I say this, but is the British imperial approach. You could argue that not everybody had their liberties, but if you want to basically preserve order, then because what they did, and he used the example of Kenya and the Mau Maus that in Kenya that were like not only killing British people but killing even more Africans, and what they did when they came in was not only did they squash these guys, but they ran the country for some period of time until the right things were in place so that the country could run itself. But they ran the country, and so they prioritized liberty or order or whatever over democracy. Mm-hmm. Because if they had gone with what the people wanted, you would have had a different result. And so Truman's statement about I believe that we must assist free peoples to work out their own destinies in their own way. This guy made the argument that the United States, because it's in our blood to not be colonial, to not be imperial, all we're left with is drop in, kick ass, and at some point, probably prematurely, you're going to pull out, and then you're going to leave a power void, and then the cycle repeats itself. Yep. And so we're not able to play that role because of our principles about like being a republic and not being imperial. So,
but then I have questions like, why are you going in the first place? Right? If it's and this goes back to my question about communism. Like if you're going in just to repeal communism at all costs, and then you leave this void and something else comes in that's equally bad.
Right.
Have you actually helped?
No.
Have you hurt? Have you?
Well, you could leave out communism. That's exactly what happened in Iraq, right? Like we had people in Iraq kind of holding like
pieces.
It's together. More like a police force, though. Yeah. Like we didn't install a government.
No, in fact, I think that's what their peacekeeping force or whatever they called it.
So we go in as a police. That was what I was getting back to because you were
police
like
action. Yeah.
We're going in as a police force that, and you can keep law and order for some period of time, but at some point, unless you're gonna run the place,
Right.
which is colonialism,
Which is not what we want to do.
not what we want to do, then at some point you're going to leave. And then what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think if that article that you read is really telling, one, I agree with him 100%, but it very much shapes, I think, the premise of your original question on should we even be there, does it work? And I would have to agree that it doesn't seem to be working. You could probably point out, you'd have to really think about it and maybe point to a few here or there that were, maybe it did work, but Afghanistan, Iraq.
Yeah, and even before that, Beirut, so many.
I mean, the whole Middle East is littered with, I think, us trying to influence without colonialization.
Yeah.
It hasn't taken root.
When we act in what I consider a hawkish way, it rarely goes well for us. If we go in and do regime, like I'm not sure of a single regime change that we've enacted that has gone well in the long run.
That Cuba thing kind of backfired. Yeah.
So, but when we exhibit influence in softer ways, and even in hard ways, like if we're going to back our allies, when we back our allies to make sure that they're safe and secure, that their borders are safe and secure, that usually works out for us. But our softer approaches work as well. I mean, we have a lot of soft influence in the world that I didn't fully appreciate until I spent some time recently.
Oh yeah, like what?
Well, just the amount of, I mean, just like, and it's a cliche, but like just Levi's.
But you're back now and you're legal and everything.
I'm back and legal,
cleared
yeah,
up.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
But it's amazing to me.
Like Levi's?
Yeah. I mean, think about something quintessentially American.
Right.
Levi jeans?
Levi jeans, which are like in Russia, they were money, right?
Yeah.
Now, why is it, like, who cares? It's a pair of Levi jeans to us, right? They're not even the most fashionable
I think it's
jean
funny that you
anymore.
picked a Jewish product.
Are they?
Well, Levi Strauss originally, the guy.
They're everywhere.
Well, they're
But that kind of influence, when the rest of the world looks at what the U.S. is doing and wants to emulate it one way or the other,
yeah.
and you see that all over. There's the U.S. influence, pop culture, music, movies, Hollywood, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That soft
that good
influence,
stuff. Yeah.
all that good stuff.
Yeah.
There's very few places in the world that resent us for that. But when we go in a hawkish manner, when we step in, the world hates us. Like, why are you... That's when we get ourselves, I think, that's when we get
that's
ourselves in
interesting.
trouble.
I like it. It took me a while to get where you're going, but I agree. The soft influence, I think, is a nice way of saying it, because you look at the influence that it's made, and the soft influence that's made on acceptance or individuals on one side of the aisle or gender or race. If you put it in a movie and you make it a heartfelt story and you get to see the victim and what they've dealt with, and now all of a sudden you come out and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. Now I see the world through a different set of eyes. And to your point, you rattle off everything else that we've been doing. There's probably some positive things there. I would agree. Yeah.
But there's also, it's not just positive, it's real influence.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree.
Right?
100%.
Technology, Apple,
so we ought to
Microsoft.
use it better, is I guess what you're saying. Trevor, you had I saw you leaning in there. You've been awfully quiet. I feel like you gotta give us something. I got nothing over there. He's busy turning knobs.
I think we should just go back to conquest.
Conquest. I knew you were gonna say that. Conquest.
Someone conquer the world already.
Yeah. Well, the Romans did, at least the part that they knew about.
All of it.
That was your perception of how much world there is the world.
But there's a whole one.
But the whole
Your
now,
ignorance doesn't dictate reality.
Are you talking about all the realms or just this? Because are you guys not up on the flat Earth thing?
I'm familiar with
Yeah, there's like
I fell off of
This
it
is-
not too long ago.
I am not. We're back to the flat
Earth is
Earth.
just a realm, and Mars is also Mars isn't another planet. I can't believe.
I have no idea.
Where did you go to school? Where's your education? So
This doesn't sound like
Mars-
education.
Has Mars been pulled into the flat Earth discussion?
well, it's another realm. You can get there directly.
You can just walk from
You
here.
don't
to
have
there.
to.
Walking off the edge.
Yeah, yeah.
Is
Trev,
that
can you
right?
pull up the map of Earth and Mars as two different realms?
I don't
He doesn't
have that
want-
one.
He's like, I don't want to go there on my computer because then
Yeah, that it's on my
then
search
I'm on a
history.
list.
And, yeah, that's right.
So-
Some of this-
I have to confess that yeah, some things there because I was personally
Oh, I found the most accurate flat map. Oh no, never mind. That's flat map, not flat Earth. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, not a flat map. That's just a representation
Weird
of
projections.
the round Earth, which we know now is not correct. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
I
well,
like where you went with the Scott. I like where you went with the soft influence, but certainly from outside of the social standpoint. But what it's done, technologically, etc. I think there's absolutely measured good there. Yeah.
Well-
it would be difficult to measure, but I mean, nonetheless, it goes
I'm not supposed to
beyond
chew the ice.
people shooting and killing
Well,
each other and going to war. But
so it's a tool. Basically.
Absolutely.
yeah,
It's a tool that we could learn to use
better.
better. We could be
Definitely
smarter about how we use the tool.
Yes.
Although, as
They could
soon as you
watch
start
more of
doing that,
Saving the Dream podcast.
more of the Saving the Dream podcast, but then automatically like my propaganda antenna go up, right? Because as soon as you start talking about using those things as a tool of influence, then I start worrying about propaganda.
Well, I wasn't actually thinking of it as a political tool per se, so much as when you talk about the United States' influence in the world and how do we influence the world.
Oh, okay. Just
Right.
evidence of influence.
We can influence in a hawkish manner, which I think has in my mind proven to be largely erroneous,
But-
failure.
Not that we're done stepping in front of that truck.
No.
Right.
We can do it through NATO and backing our allies, which I'm a proponent of. I think we need to have allies in Europe and around the world, and we need to act together to control our security. I think terrorism is a very real thing, and I think you have to project that power to be able to combat that. But I think these other influences are equally important or equally useful because it provides a positive
Yeah.
view of us instead of a negative view
Yeah.
of us.
So it all comes back to who do we trust to adequately, to properly navigate all this? Because right now we have people.
I mean, you just put up flat Earth argument. So I mean, we're who do we trust? I mean, this
We
is
might
a
have-
real argument. This is real
might
debate in
have-
some people's minds. Like they are.
We might have to
locked
come
in.
back. We might have to come back and
We
do
got a
something.
ways to go.
We need to do a part two on this. So where we ended up was it does make sense that we ought to have we ought to be doing some things internationally for various objectives that we can't just be like, well, we can, but perhaps maybe it best not for us to just be this closed off country because we're too big and we have too much influence and we have and we want to. So anyway, so all of that's good. It then leads to the question of, well, how do you do it effectively? And which the prerequisite is you got to have people leading the thing that you can at least kind of trust to.
That are worth a damn.
Right. The other thing is, which would be interesting to talk about, because we didn't have time to get into this, but it does seem to me, this is an observation I've made recently, it seems to promote more globalism, which I'm not a fan of. So
Too late.
I know. I'm a little.
It's here.
Too late. Like I feel, and Trevor and I have talked about this before, where it's almost like if you take a position that sounds anything like nationalism, you're demonized. Like anything that smells like, well, we ought to really do what's best for our country, like is flying in the face of the WHO and the WEF and all the people that are trying to do all the great things in the world, right? And I'm like highly suspicious of a lot of those initiatives as well. So by jumping into these, opportunities to, throw our weight around in the world and have the allies and have the, you know what I'm saying? Like it kind of starts to lead to a more globalistic way of thinking, which I think there's some dangers in, but that's probably for another day.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
But these are the things that, people, I think, like, this is like this really thick soup that everybody just gets lost in because most of us are just trying to we're trying to live our life and do the shit that we need to do, and then we hear this on the news and we hear that on the news, and how do you navigate?
A part two of, I don't know if we could solve it. Maybe you can. Scott might be able to. But how do you?
He's clearly the smartest one in the room.
But how do you effectively? I think that's really where we're at. And I know I keep coming back to it, and as well said, but let's say you get the house in order. That's one.
Yeah.
That's one thing you got to do. And two, how do you effectively lead that charge? Because it is, like, I think.
And responsibly.
And like go back to maybe this core belief that we had being from the golden era of internationalism. How do you do it effectively with good intent? Be that police, that, I don't know if you can.
Maybe what we need to come back and do is, hey, Mr. Producer Guy, write this down. Let's do a follow-up of, so you made a very clear statement that I agree with, which is when Truman said that, only this one. When Truman said that, our house was in order, and now it's not. Maybe we need to talk about how did we go from having it in order to not having it in order, and how far out of order are we?
By evidence of what's actually going on in the house right now.
Yeah.
No, but really, like, so it's because it's not that long of a time period.
No, that's the frightening thing.
From 1947 to whatever is
80 years. Is that it?
to now, but I think our house has been
60 years.
How long is our
my math right?
At what point could we say, well, our house is no longer in order the way it was? Well, what do we mean by that exactly? And when did we lose it? And how did that happen? I think we could solve the problems of the world.
I think we're getting pretty close.
Right here.
More drinks.
Right here. More drinks. All right. Hey, Trev, anything to throw in last minute? You can't do the Coliseum when you did that last time.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, we forgot to sing a song again.
Like, man,
They're saying, oh, jeez.
What was the song?
Please, heaven knows.
Forget a song.
We're supposed to start with the song, and we keep forgetting.
saving the dream.
supposed to start with a
saving
song?
the dream podcast.
No. Let's see. Last time we did
Come on.
we did "Singing in the Rain" last time, and we did the Muppet song.
We did do
the
the
Beach
Muppet
Boys.
song.
What?
We did the Beach Boys.
Do we have a song for today?
That we sing, or you just tee up and you play?
We all sing it. We all chime
the
in.
YouTubes.
We all chime in. He's got nothing for me.
Nothing. I got nothing.
You got.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I'm trying to think of something that's relevant to.
That doesn't have to be relevant. Any song.
Oh. You pick the song.
Oh, forget it. We're done now.
Your show.
There is no song. There is no spoon.